into this. So, apparently, Disney hired a non white girl to play Snow White. Let's read the first part of the fairy tale because it's very interesting. Now, I'm going to, as by way of talking about all of this, Snow White, when I was a little kid, was my favorite Disney movie. It was my favorite fairy tale. I didn't like Cinderella that much. I mean, I think I only saw it once because back then Disney didn't really show their movies out there. Morning, Jeremy. Back in the 80s and 90s, remember to hit the like button. Back in the 80s or back in the 70s, Disney did not really put their movies out where you could just watch them anytime. And of course, this was before. Why the fuck is that on my? Okay, whatever. Sorry. This was before. VHS and streaming and all the rest of that stuff. Even The Wonderful World of Disney, the TV show, didn't show the movies. We didn't get to see Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty or Peter Pan or any of it. It was pretty much, just, I think the closest we ever got was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is actually one of my favorite Disney productions. So let's go Snow White. All right, let's go do this. So I'm going to read the first part. Snow White, a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. It was in the middle of winter, and the snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky. And a queen sat at her window working, and her embroidery frame was of ebony. As she worked, gazing at times out on the snow, she pricked her finger, and there fell from it 3 drops of blood on the snow. Howdy. Then when she saw how bright and red it looked, she said to herself, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the embroidery frame." Not very long after, she had a daughter, with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, and she was named Snow White. Brothers Grimm they wrote these fairy tales. Fairy tales are dark. They're not necessarily the happy endings that we imagine them to be. You have to read it to the end. There are lessons there. Think about Hansel and Gretel. They go and eat this woman's house. Of course she'd be pissed. But if you look at Snow White is a Caucasian girl with black hair and white skin. We are talking about a woman who is either Scandinavian, which, yes, that happens in Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, we're not all blondes. Even I'm not really blonde. We're not all blondes, but the pale skin is Celtic or Scandinavian. So you can imagine an Irish girl playing Snow White. You can imagine a Swedish girl or a German girl or a Norwegian girl or a Danish girl even playing Snow White, a British girl, a Welsh girl like, oh gee, who is Snow White? Who could play Snow White from the Golden Age? A young Elizabeth Taylor. How's that? So we got Disney, and I'm going to say brownwashing Snow White out of the name of diversity, because there aren't any stories about Snow White that are like Snow White in Latino culture that they could, create. There isn't anything original out there that they could go find for this girl. So they brownwash a fairy tale that's, centuries old, written by white men So what's it about? Let's talk about critical race theory. When I was a kid, when I think a lot of us, good morning, when I think a lot of us were kids, grew up in the 70s and 80s, we were still taught to think critically. Translation, think for ourselves. Look at an issue and decide how you feel about it. Now we had our left-wing fascists. I remember a guy in high school named Joe Larson who was a red diaper baby and wouldn't shut the fuck up about it. And literally, I thought was going to have a heart attack at the age of 16 when Reagan won in 1984. I mean, I'm not kidding you. This guy was a true believer. But we didn't teach anything at all about you're guilty because you're white. They taught history. And history meant something. All right. Now, a lot of people say the winners write the history books, and that's true. There's a way of learning about history that's critical, that's objective, that has been lost because of critical race theory. We've got Oprah Winfrey, that fat, racist, slob bitch, supporting the 1619 Project. Morning, we've got, Benny Arthur Johnson. Go look up the thing that was just put out there on Instagram by Benny Arthur Johnson from Iowa. They literally had teachers come into a conference and have to sign and force them to learn about, to digest and marinate in critical race theory, and then sign a pledge that they teach it. When you look at what they're supposed to teach, it is basically Nuremberg laws designed by white people to attack white people. You gotta understand, these people aren't communists. Stop calling them that. All right? They're fascists. China stopped being a purely communist country the day they allowed billionaires, okay? Private property ownership. That has nothing at all to do. I mean, I can't imagine private property ownership in the Soviet Union, all right, or in Romania when Ceausescu was the premier there, all right? But yes, we have private property ownership in China. I said this yesterday. The most efficient, sadly, form of government is fascism. What we have here are a bunch of people who are motivated by keeping you down. To a left-wing fascist, there is no upward mobility. And it's really interesting to me, when I look at the rise of fascism in, let's say, Italy, and Benito Mussolini, he was a newspaper editor. He started out as a socialist. When he realized, and this was after the fall of the Tsar and after World War I, that socialism and communism weren't exactly popular to the people of Italy, he relabeled it. He rebranded it, called it fascism. Okay. And they accepted it. There's a way of being, ouch, stop that. There's a way of being left-wing socialist where you can fake patriotism like that guy in Germany did. You can fake nationalism like Mussolini did. Mussolini, let's put it this way, I think it was in 1936, 1938 maybe. I gotta go back and look. Where the Italians went into Ethiopia so they could bring back the Roman Empire, because that's what they do. It's like, what the heck? So there was private property. Okay, Mussolini could not have gotten where he got without wealthy people. Hitler courted the wealthy people. He said his movement was of the middle class. And a lot of the Nazis came from there. Yes, I just said, hey, General Katerin, a lot of these people came from that middle class. All right. The reason why they got power, again, was fear of communism. The average German living in Berlin, in Charlottenburg, let's say maybe the people that lived in my apartment, walked down the street on the Furstendamm, seeing communists and Nazis beating each other up. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He did have bad time in Greece. And this is in the 20s when right wing, left wing, left wing and left wing violence was going on. I refused to call those guys with the N that starts their moniker anything but left, a version of the left, fighting each other. And German people, you know the culture, it's very, this will be straight, this will be this way, this will be this way. You know, everything had to be efficient. The German mind is geared to that way. So they see all this lawlessness going on. And of course, if you know anything about Berlin, it's always been a batshit crazy town. But you had the cabarets, you had wild displays of depravity and things like that going on. And the average people didn't like it. And they saw what that guy was saying. I will give you law and order, and I will make the trains run on time. And they embraced it. Okay, they were either they embraced it or they were so complacent they didn't care. And for a while, Germany was doing pretty well. Things were getting back in order. You have to understand, when you have an economy where you see old ladies pushing wheelbarrows full of marks, 1 billion marks, Reichsmarks, to buy a loaf of bread, that's bad. Okay, that's what drove all this. And a fear of communism. They were terrified of the Bolsheviks. All right, you're a German shopkeeper and you hear the guy in with this little stupid hat on and his little dumb uniform with his little belt screaming about the proletariat and how bad the bourgeoisie is. You're gonna be pissed and you're gonna be scared because they're talking about taking away your livelihood, taking away your property. Okay, the kind of socialism that guy in Germany advocated was protecting private property, expanding the Reich, but giving you things, healthcare, education, etc., etc., building the military, violating the Versailles Treaty. Okay, because it preyed on the Germans' love of country. They courted the military, and they courted military heroes. You had Hermann Goering, fighter pilot, World War I. You had others join in. And it gave that party legitimacy where those people would not join the other lefties. Okay. They would not, because the other lefties weren't considered nationalistic. Okay. And the kind of nationalism I'm talking about is the nationalism of chauvinism, of conquering. You know, we're talking about living room in the East, having scapegoats, the Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, you name it. Of course, that party had its share of homosexuals, okay? But they were the right kind, all right? Critical race theory is a brand of this, all right? And it is designed by people to put down what they think is the petit bourgeois, which is us. You, me, middle class, with our so-called McMansions, etc., making our kids feel guilty, making our kids hate themselves and hate their country. Because it's basically out for the destruction of the United States and Western culture. Snow White, a fairy tale, is part of Western culture. Okay, why not put a girl who doesn't belong in the role as Snow White? I'm not saying this as a racist, I'm not. I'm sure she's a lovely actress, but she doesn't need to be playing Snow White. You see the thumbnail in this. That's what Snow White's supposed to look like. All right, she's supposed to look like a dark-haired Celtic girl or a dark-haired Scandinavian girl. Yep, and, there you go. And yet we have this garbage, and the reason why is they're trying to destroy our culture. Now, why? It's out of hatred. It's out of insecurity. They get a bunch of kids that they've conditioned to believe that the world they were born into sucks. And if you hear someone display or love of country, then they're bad. All right. We had Ariel from The Little Mermaid blackwashed. If you have a ginger character, immediately that character will be destroyed because, and I think Joe Rogan brought this up, the smallest group in the world of humans are redheads. Okay. It's weird we have two redheads, blue-eyed redheads in my family, but that's true. Okay. And yet they're being blackwashed because they're too white. All right. We don't see blondes at all anymore. And that started in the 90s, that long, stringy, dirty, dark hair look, okay, that I even embraced. Which was a complete opposite of the tall, clean, athletic blonde with the white teeth and the smile. All right. Christy Brinkley, and I mean, even Cindy Crawford, who's not blind, still, that was, now it's, dare I say, overweight, not Caucasian, etc., etc., etc. And it's racist. Morning, Chris. And I find it fascinating when I look at this stuff, and it's going to flop. It's going to go bad. Look, I'll be right back. But I will keep talking. Here's the deal. If we've got Star Wars, just a second, what are you doing? Oh, bad dog, bad. These are mine. How the hell did he get these? Oh my gosh. I get up to wipe my nose and I hope he didn't chew these up. I hope they still work or I'm screwed. I'm going to be like Cameron was yesterday on Lorena's stream. Where was I? If Disney is sending Marvel woke, and yet we now see indications that, hey Deborah, that Lucasfilm is being restructured and going a different way. That means Disney probably already knows that going woke is not a good idea. And I honestly think that these franchises will try it, it'll fail, and they'll go. I don't know what possessed them to brownwash Snow White when I read you guys that part of the fairy tale. I had the book when I was a kid, the Little Golden Book, my favorite fairy tale. And this pisses me off. and I'll tell you something. First, they came for the blondes in the 90s. All right. Do you remember the movie that Beyonce made with that other black actor? And there was a blonde girl in it, and she's supposed to be crazy and obsessed with her husband. That was the most racist fucking thing I've ever seen in my life. I was stuck watching that goddamn thing on an airplane. You know, they don't. They look, first off, when you've got the black and brown community getting sick of this shit. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. We're talking about creating art. And Snow White, again, I'm gonna have to put the dog in his house. Kojak, where are you? Birthday boy. What are you doing? He's going in his house. All right, come on. I got stuff I gotta do. Come on. I should have put you in your house before I started. Come on. Go. House. Get in here. Go. Okay, I'm back. All right. So we got Snow White as a pillar of culture. The fairy tales are. Little girls read them. Peter Pan is geared at boys, etc., etc. These are things that were traditional that you would read to your kids. I'm sure that there are African mythologies and there's fairy tales that could be turned into cartoons, into live action shows for that community. I'm sure there's stuff from Central and South America, maybe even Spain, which is white, but still, it gears towards the Latino culture. That could be done, but no, what they do is they take ours. And it's everybody's, honestly. No one had a problem with Snow White being white, until critical race theory showed up and shit all over it. Let's talk about this. So we grew up being able to think critically. We grew up understanding history better. Maybe not perfectly, because again, there are people even back then who embraced racism and all the rest of this shit. And really, when you look at wealthy people screaming about racism, it's just another form of the racist idea called white man's burden that the British had. Yeah, you're right, Senator Dave. It is cultural appropriation, but it's okay for them to do it. If you guys go back to the Heights issue, when the director of the Heights was being interviewed by that awful bitch with her orange lipstick, that blaze orange deer hunter color orange lipstick, and it's like, and what she told him right out, I don't see me in your show. What people like that don't understand, and what white people on the top looking around don't understand, is that there are various shades of white. All right, Celts, Irish, Scots, Norwegians, Danes, Swedes, Germans, Northern Europeans are very, very, very white. But there are even various skin colors there. Then you get into France and Italy, and you get a more diverse tone to the olive tones in Spain and Portugal and Greece and all over the place, okay, in Europe. So there isn't one color white. All right, anybody who thinks that is a racist. Just like anybody who thinks there's only one color of black is a racist. Just like anybody who thinks there's only one color of brown is a racist. Guess what? The chick with that stupid scarf on her head and that stupid orange, blaze orange color, glow in the dark lipstick is a racist. Why? She wasn't satisfied with seeing, I guess, let's see, they're doing Washington Heights in New York. So it's obviously a Latino, mostly Puerto Rican community. Horrible. Terrible. They're too white. What the fuck are you talking about? Go sit over in the corner and think about what you just said. All right. This is the problem of critical race theory. We have a problem with people who went to school, they're millennials, they got to college when this shit started getting into the system. And Zoomers too, where they're being conditioned to think this is real and this is a thing. They get into places like Lucasfilm. Let's talk about Claudia Gray, because I was thinking about her today. They get wrapped up in identity politics. I don't know how they manage to get into creative writing. They get into getting published. But when you think about all these people, they went into those professions. They went into publishing, into filmmaking, into places like Disney, all right? And it's stunning to me. Like, I was thinking about Admiral Holdo. Claudia Gray literally invented that character. Now, you can sit there and say Rian Johnson did, but I guarantee you they were talking about it, okay? When she was writing Leia, Princess of Alderaan, all right? They wanted a LGBTQ representation in Star Wars, like, because it needed it, like it was important, like it was something that was a mistake that it didn't happen. We're talking about between 5 and 1% of the population on this planet. Okay, so we get this character. That's all she is. That is all that character is. Let's talk about the fact that they complain about no black representation in Star Wars. I'm sure Billy D. Williams, who played Lando extremely well and played him as a very complicated guy, is unhappy with that. I'm sure Samuel L. Jackson is like, and all the other people of color who played different characters, like Jimmy Smits, who played a very important role in the prequels. I mean, Bail Organa is one of the most important people in Star Wars, if you think about it, all right? He raised Leia in a way that would get her involved with the rebellion, all right? Without him, where would she have been? Think about it. So we've got plenty of representation of different groups of people. I don't believe in race. When someone says, bases something on race, I look at them and say, what color is your blood? Cut your finger. Is it red? Cut my finger. It's red, right? And we're not different. We're not different at all. They don't like that. Equity means they want all of us in the same shit together. And how do you do that? You take away from people like us and you give it to people who don't have any ambition, who just want to take because they're told by a fraud of a teacher that they're owed something, which is where this reparations thing comes from. When you try to tell them only 1% of the population in the South actually owned slaves, I got bit by a mosquito. They get pissed off. They don't want to hear about it. It's true. It's true. Go with this historical fact. All right. They don't want a discussion, a rational, objective discussion of history, of race relations. We were in a post-racial period in the 80s. No one cared. Think about the comedians that got started and got their start by going on SNL. Garrett Morris, Eddie Murphy, on and on and on. The female comedians. You know, think about all of that. All right, yet that was a racist time. But you got to understand, there's a cynical point of view behind this. And I'm going to bring up Obama, and if you're a fan, I'm sorry, but I'm going to tell you the truth. You don't get to be an agitator like him, and that's what he's been his whole life, without having a chip on your shoulder. He was a red diaper baby. His grandparents that raised him were communists. They ran to Hawaii because they got themselves in trouble. He was raised by them and his mother. He wasn't really even raised in the United States. His understanding of the United States and the people is very warped. Okay. When he went to Chicago, he became a community organizer? That to me is some asshole standing on a corner screaming. All right. They'd walk into banks and shake down banks. That's what they did. Okay. You got to start in politics in Bill Ayers' house. Bill Ayers was a member of the Weather Underground that were responsible for bombings of the Pentagon, the U.S. Capitol, and they murdered a judge and a cop. Okay. His wife, Bernadine Dorn, was also part of that. So they were bad people and probably should have been in jail for life for what they did. They weren't hippies. Hippies lived on communes and just kind of turned off the rest of the world and did whatever they did. These people weren't even protesters. They were outright terrorists. And there he is getting his start in Bill Ayers' house. All right. His own preacher is an angry, vile, filthy, I think, depraved and perverted racist himself. Right? The Catholic priest, Father Flager, that followed Obama around with foaming at the mouth, he has now been removed. He does not have a parish, he doesn't have anything. Why? Because he got called out for abusing kids. I'm a Catholic. But when I saw that guy, I was like, that guy's dirty. He's sitting there running around talking about social justice when a good Catholic priest doesn't talk like that. Because there's social justice and then there's what the fuck is that? What you get with people like Claudia Gray is a very warped, skewed idea of social justice. Social justice is looking at the rich man and saying, why don't you, out of your own pocket, help these people? Let me tell you, the biggest, biggest, probably left-wing communist, well, not communist, but Democrat character is in all of literature? Ebenezer Scrooge. Wanna know why? When those guys show up and ask him to give some money to help the poor for Christmas, he says, are there no treadmills? Are there no poorhouses? And they said, there are, I wish there were not. And Scrooge said, well, they should go there. And the guy goes, well, many won't go there, and many would rather die than go there. And Scrooge says, well, then they should die and decrease the surplus population. That's a hard leftist Democrat talking point now. Okay. They don't want to give you or me or anybody the chance to go up. And America is an upwardly mobile economy and society. When you talk about equity, it's not outcomes they're worried about. It's everybody stays the same. And that is wrong. And that is the antithesis of what we're living. But let's talk about art. And back in the 30s, when that guy was running Germany, he created a museum of German art in Munich. You walked in there, and I've seen pictures of the artwork. There are examples on the internet. It was very soulless, very geared toward only one idea. It was very political. If you look at the artwork of the Soviet Union, it's the same thing. Maoist China, same thing. Look at their movies. We have Battleship Potemkin, Triumph of the Will. You've got Maoist Chinese films, talking about the glories of the Red Guard and all the rest of this shit. There isn't any creativity because people who are ideologues, not idealists. Real artists are idealists, and they're in love with beauty. They want to make things more beautiful. If you're a writer, you have a need to tell a story. Okay. You're not worried about the political ramifications. If you're an artist, you see something beautiful and you want to capture it in a photograph, or you want to paint it, or you want to write a poem about it, or you want to write a paragraph for a novel about it. Okay. If you're a filmmaker, you're there to tell a story. You need to tell the story. It has absolutely nothing to do with politics, and it shouldn't. The art in that museum was garbage. Now I'm going to tell you something. And I'm going to couch it with Claudia Gray, Justina Ireland, Chuck Wendig, and the red diaper baby himself, Pablo Hidalgo. Back in the early 1900s, a young Schicklgruber, we'll call him, showed up in Vienna, walked into the Viennese School of Art, and asked to be considered to be part of that. Viennese School of Art put out artists like one of my favorites, Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele, etc. They looked at his work and said no. The reason is there's no soul to it, there's no feeling to it, it's parochial garbage. Okay, and if you look at the postcards that Schicklgruber painted, there was nothing there. They were just daubs on a postcard. The people look like wisps. The buildings are overbearing. Doesn't that sound like Berlin when all that construction was going on in the 30s? Overbearing architecture that is ugly and only there to show the power of the government, and the people are reduced to that size. All right. He grew angry. He grew bitter. Why? Because he wasn't let into the club. Because he didn't have the talent to be part of the club, they thought. And they were right. So he's painting postcards on the streets of Vienna, selling them for pennies, living in Viennese flop houses, and reading anti-Semitic pamphlets by a Austrian nobleman, or so-called, named Georg von Scheumer, who called himself the Knight of Rosenau. These pamphlets were anti-Semitic garbage. The resentment Schicklgruber started growing was born out of bitterness about not being part of the club. So by the time he gets to Germany and starts, this is after World War One, because he ran to Germany because he didn't want to be drafted into the Austro-Hungarian army because he hated the Habsburg royal family. He goes to Germany, World War One starts. There are actual pictures of him, as it was announced, standing in the background, losing his shit. He's so happy. And they're real. They are real. After World War One, he was still in the German army. He was asked to spy on these nationalistic, socialist. They weren't nationalistic. They were socialist clubs that were forming political parties. He walked into a gathering of one called the Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Socialist German Workers' Party. He walked out a signed-on member, and by the time the Beer Hall Putsch was over, and he, spent time in prison and wrote that stupid book, came out, was meeting wealthy industrialists like the Krupps, like I.G. Farben, like the Tysons, like the Messerschmitts, etc., etc. They were the ones that propelled him to where he ended up. Okay. He courted the middle class and their fear of Bolshevism. He used the old tried and true European scapegoat, the Jews, as a scapegoat. Okay. Because it was easy for them. That's if you ever look into the history of anti-Semitism in Germany, in Europe in general, the Jews were always going to be the scapegoat for that. Okay, for them, for their failures. And I think Schicklgruber looked on the people at the Viennese School of Art, and there were Jews that were part of it, and decided that it was the Jews' fault that he didn't get to be this great artist. So he considered himself an art expert, which he considered himself an expert in architecture. He considered himself an expert in music. Huge fan of Wagner and of the pagan spectacles that they were. And what we have now are people like him that don't feel like they're part of the in crowd. You've got Justine Ireland getting your master's thesis in microaggressions in children's literature. What the fuck is she talking about? This is the same attitude as Mr. Schicklgruber had. They consider themselves victims. Okay. I don't like people who start shit waving the flag of victimhood. If you started it and people get mad and retaliate or come back at you, you're not a victim. You are a shit stirrer and you are an instigator. Okay. Schicklgruber wasn't a talented artist. He was an orator, and he was smart enough to see his way into the hearts and minds of the German populace by feeding on their fears. Now we've got Claudia Gray creating asexual human amoebas and is, you know, a type of victimhood. All right. You've got Justina Ireland with her problem being a fat black woman, instead of taking care of her problem. It's our fault where she is. Okay. The only reason why these people were ever considered to write for Star Wars or even to get published is because they had to fill a quota. We need a fat, overweight, angry, obsessed, sexually obsessed, purple-haired female to write a book. We need an angry black woman who has never been oppressed in her life but feels like it to write a book. We need an angry Latino guy who feels oppressed to write a book. All right. They're not talented. They're political ideologues. Okay. Political ideologues cannot create art. All right. Look at Winston Churchill. He was a painter. He went from being a member of the Liberal Party to a member of the Conservative Party. He was not an ideologue. What he was he was a patriotic member of Parliament who was a descendant of the Duke of Marlborough and half American to boot. When you think about that and you look at what he was able to accomplish, and he wasn't a bad artist, okay? You look at other artists, Delacroix, Vincent van Gogh was one of my favorites. And it's very interesting what enthusiasm for what you're doing, what seeing something that you feel needs to be immortalized does to your soul and does with your art. Okay? It also does that with writing, filmmaking, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Empire Strikes Back. They're timeless. They tell a story. You know, and those people from Germany make really good bad guys. Okay, they do. Well, so do the Russians, but in fact, I often think, after growing up during the Cold War, that the Russians were probably worse bad guys. I mean, they were a hell of an enemy. We'll just put it that way. You have to love what you're doing. You have to be an idealist for beauty, for passion, for love, for telling a story. You have to need in your soul to do it. When you look at the novels of Chuck Wendig, there is no soul. Look at what he does. Look at his Twitter. All right. The guy is a raving left-wing fascist lunatic. I can't imagine being his daughter or his child and being raised to hate myself because I'm white. That's abuse, basically. What they've done, these critical race people have done, is they've basically conditioned, I think, mental illness. Now look at Lucasfilm. You've got Pablo Hidalgo, who's the band leader, who is a red diaper baby. He's gonna be 48 in October. You've got Matt Martin, who's what, 32, 33 years old, millennial, and you got other ones about that age. They don't know any better. They really don't know any better. They can't watch anything without looking it through the social justice CRT lens, which makes them terrible, terrible artists and storytellers. Okay, look at Dave Filoni. He doesn't look at it that way. Okay, he don't look at it that way. Why? Because He learned from George Lucas. Okay. Jon Favreau is one of us. He didn't grow up then. All right. These people are untalented. They got hired. I mean, I'm sure Matt Martin is gay. He got hired because of it, not because he's a talented guy. All right. You know, you can love a franchise. It doesn't mean you should be writing for that franchise or working on that franchise if you can't do the job properly. And if you're a storyteller and you can't tell a decent story without throwing in relevant politics like Admiral Holdo, all right, there's a problem. The fans are going to notice. The fans aren't going to like it. When you've got social justice based characters like Ray, like Kyle Ron, who is literally the perfect example of guilty white boy. And you're looking at him and you're like, they can't sell merchandise. The reason why is because collectors won't buy it. Unlike that'll go in the fire pit. And the people it's aimed at won't buy it because they don't like it either. People are supposed to love it. You know, they're supposed to love it. Art, for art's sake, should uplift people. That's the thing about Star Wars. It uplifted us. Even this movie uplifted us. These people can't do romance right because they got to muddle their obsession with people's sexual, a small minority of people's depravity into it. They can't do race relations right because they got to make it all a big deal when it's not. It stopped being a big deal in the 70s. Okay? I mean, I dare anybody to find anybody more important than Diana Ross. I'll tell you, even the movie The Patriot, which, these people would call propaganda, isn't propaganda because it looks at the history of that area of the colonies in a very truthful way. There were free blacks working on farms, all right, in North Carolina. And the British did do shitty things. Now, the guy who directed the movie is a German who's very, very obsessed with communist art and everything. And the scene where they burn, they lock everybody in the church and burn everybody inside, that never happened. That's not a historically accurate thing. But finding the wife of one of the guerrillas that was harassing the British Army, and she was pregnant, and hanging her with a sign around her neck saying, "You will bear no more patriots." That was something that they did. Okay? Tarleton, or what was his name? Tarleton, the guy who did it, the colonel, ended up being an MP in the British Parliament. And he ended up being pro-slavery. And he went after, oh God, what's his face? Shit. You guys had to have seen Amazing Grace with Ioan Gruffudd. It was produced by, Patricia Heaton. Yeah, it was Tarleton. The guy was named Tarleton, and he ended up going against the fact that slavery was going to be banned in Britain. And the Parliament voted on it. And that was it. Bannister Tarleton. Yep, you got it. And Amazing Grace is a great movie. Now that's the way you do history. That's the way you write about that. Okay? There were no tokens. All right? You want to do a good movie about a black hero, do one about Frederick Douglass. You're going to have to admit he was a Republican. You could do one about black farmers defending themselves against KKK. Where do you think the National Rifle Association was born? It was started by black people to help defend themselves against Ku Klux Klan. Okay, that's part of history. CRT people don't want you to know, but it's true. Okay. This is, but going back to Snow White, this is literally, in my opinion, and we have a country right now committing genocide in front of us and we're not doing anything about it, the Chinese. They are literally killing off the Uyghur minority as we speak. They have literally destroyed Tibet. There are no Tibetans anymore. Okay? Just a bunch of nihilistic, inhumane communists or fascists running around. Right. There's something called cultural genocide. And brownwashing Snow White, blackwashing Ariel is cultural genocide. Okay? This is why it needs to stop. All right? Because people are going to fight back. And I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of people who are getting really, really sick of it. All right? You have black parents telling school boards to quit teaching it because they know the outcome. They know what's going to happen. And they don't want their kids to grow up being assholes. Okay? Do yourself a favor, and I'm going to go now because Midnight's Edge is on. Do yourself a favor. Go and look up German education policies in the 1930s. Just do it. It will blow your mind. I took a class on that. And I'm going to tell you something. The people that teach critical race theory and believe it took that class too, but they didn't learn anything. No, they did. They learned how to make what they want people to believe part of the education system. Okay, and this is why we've got Haldo, Rostico. All right, this is why we've got Dykes smooching at the end of The Rise of Palpatine. All right, this is why the Brits can't get their shit together. This is all forced to destroy the culture. Because if you get a hold of the culture, you can dehumanize a population of people, which is what they want to do. All right. Anyway, I've said too much. I'll probably get yelled at. Anyway, for those who are upset at the Indiana Jones rumor video, I am not mad at Doomcock. We're not mad at each other. I just felt the need to go, hey, wait a minute. Okay. So whoever tried to get that video taken off, no, I wasn't bullying anybody. Okay, so please stop it and think before you. Anyway, I gotta go. I'll see you guys around the galaxy.